So just out of curiosity, how many people here use GenAI daily? Just raise your hand. Okay, that's pretty much like our survey. And how many people have actually built a RAG system? I'll explain it later. Okay, fewer. Okay, so everyone has something to learn. Cool. So let's start. We'll give you some confetti, like Jack earlier. It's the beauty of Quarto. So a little bit about me. As you introduced, I'm Jan Siml. I work on decision intelligence at LexisNexis. What is it? Well, pretty much it's making data turn into profits. In my experience, bit of a mixed bag, but in the past year and a half, I have basically become a professional string wrangler. With Cameron, we have co-founded Julia AI org, so we can kind of formalize some of the GenAI efforts. We have some great Google Summer of Code students, and I'm also the creator of promptingtools.jl, which I will talk about later as well, and a bunch of other projects. I do have to say that this talk represents my personal views and not those of my employer. So, agenda. I want to talk a little bit about why this could be interesting to you, whether you're convinced or not yet. I will try to pepper it with a lot of little demos and tips, so you probably can get some ideas out of that. I will also mention how to build successful GenAI systems so that you have a recipe that you can follow, which no one ever does, but hey, if you do half of the recipe, that's already pretty good. And I will try to leave time for questions in the end, so you can like roast me properly about all the hard questions you have on GenAI. So, yeah, one thing I should say, I will not have a slide about why Julia is the best for GenAI. I know it's a bummer. I had a slide like that in my JuliaCon talk last year, so you can check that if that feels good. But what's important to know about GenAI is that it's pretty much just sending requests to these online models. And what you tend to do as a programmer is really just wrangling the strings around it, right? So you need much less from the language, which is kind of different than a lot of the things we have heard about in this conference. So kind of keep that in mind. So what is generative AI? What I want to call out here, as the name suggests, it generates things in the end of the process usually. But the thing to know is that it's not always just text. It can be images, video, or any other content, right? So they say picture says more than 1,000 words. I'm not sure what it says about videos, but this is what I thought my presentation will look like. This is generated with Runaway new model. So as you could see, there was a grass and a few more people. Well, that's some weirdo. There was a grass and a lot of people. So yeah, you can tell GenAI does not predict future. Yeah. How do I escape this guy? Okay, cool. The other thing, it's really unbound for your creativity. So like if you were ever wondering what your pet would look like as a superhero, well, this is a 3D model generated with Hyperhuman. You can do actually quite high-res resolution renders of 3D objects. If you're into games or anything like that, that's actually pretty exciting. The amount of work that you would have to do in the past is just unreal. So why should you be interested? There are broadly 3 areas that I see, and then a lot of them that I won't mention, which would have kind of a lot of similar use cases. So it might be literally for your leisure. It's a lot of fun, and like I said, there are no limits to your creativity with the tools we have now. There's productivity, right? Nowadays, you can literally buy time by using some of these tools. You pay a very little, cents, and you can save minutes and hours. And the third one, business. There are a lot of exciting things you can do, and I will mention examples of each later on. There might be a lot of other motivations. There is social impact. You can help a lot of people now. You can do cooler research. I have seen successful AI therapists and things like that. So this is not the only things you can do. I just wanted to call out some of the main ones. So when it comes to leisure, I'm going to shortchange you here. You can already generate a lot of short clips, songs, novels, whatever it is that you're interested in and you like to spend your time on. With the demo, well, I already showed you video, so again, I'm going to be saving time here. But yeah, just open those websites. You don't even have to pay most of the time because they are desperate to get users, and you can just try it out. It's actually unreal what you can do. And I have a tip for you. I presume every one of you is working on your Sonic Pi game, right, to become a DJ in your spare time. But let's say you're not that good yet. So at your next party, literally pull out suno.ai and have everyone pitch in with like, what would be a cool idea for some lyric? What do we want to talk about? What happened at this party? And then come up with some crazy style fusion. I want a techno reggaeton, and just see what it produces. It's actually a lot of fun. Highly recommend. Yeah, that's sort of parties I go to. So arguably the biggest reason why I created a prompting tools package was the productivity. Because Julia is by far the best language when it comes to time to results, right? And I felt like I need generative AI to be part of that story. Otherwise, Julia would be just left behind. So what are some of the use cases? Well, if you have to, I don't know, find an email for your dentist to change your appointment, you have to draft an email for it, right? Like all those little admin tasks in your life are just like wasting time that you could spend doing something more meaningful. So you can actually automate a lot of that already. You can obviously speed up coding, whether that's kind of for fun or whatever you do. And you can also do brainstorming. It's actually much easier to critique something that gets produced by the model that you can then build on, right? It's a great unblocker when you're kind of stuck. So as a demo, let's see how well that works. I have Proto Portal here. Before I get into that, I don't know if this is big enough. Is this big enough? Okay, can you actually see that? I want to say in Julia, we love REPL, right? So when you actually import the prompting tools, the first thing you can do is literally send any questions to the large language models literally from your REPL. How bigger is bigger? Is this bigger? Grandpa. Oh. This? Nice. I'm not sure you're gonna see much. Anyway, so literally like silly question, not something I ask every day, but like literally straight from your REPL, you just press it. I'm caching in the background because I didn't trust the Wi-Fi. I have trust issues. But like you can see, you immediately get a message, and here I get a snippet of literally what is the function, but also the exact thing I wanted the function to do, together with some inputs. So I can even try it does the right thing, right? So that's how simple it is to get these like small answers immediately where you are. But soon I actually realized that that's kind of not enough, and I actually like to have a separate app on the side, and that's where the Proto Portal comes in. So I guess most of you know this, but Proto Portal, Prompting Tools Portal. So when you see it, well, pretty much looks like ChatGPT, so why the hell did I rebuild ChatGPT, right? Well, big mistake, ChatGPT doesn't support Julia. Here you can execute Julia, you can even have the model auto-fix it, so you don't waste your time on copy it here, run it, there's an error, send it back, fix the error. All these things it does automatically, right? ChatGPT doesn't do templates. Like if you have used GenAI, you probably have a set of instructions that you like to copy paste. It's such a pain to copy paste. So you just ask for whatever template you want. Like I want to draft an email. Well, I have my email the way I like to draft my emails, right? All this is in prompting tools, already a bunch of starter templates, but you can add your own. My wife, for this tool, we host it separately so we can use it from our phones and everything. She has a bunch of her templates, right? Because she has a way how she likes to talk and everything. And there's a lot of other advanced stuff that this thing does that ChatGPT could only dream of. But like as an example, I also like to use text-to-speech. I'm not sure if you guys tried it. You can talk twice as fast as you can actually write. So you can save a lot of time. So draft an email to Tom that I'm running 20 minutes late, and I think it's best if we postpone that meeting until next Tuesday. Make it friendly because I know him well. And you just have it, you type it in, you can add however much context you want, it's already generated, right? Oh, there are some ugly bullet points because most of my emails are with bullet points, my team kind of knows. Remove the bullet points, he's a really good friend, just make it chatty and friendly. Well, the chatty didn't get transcribed very well. Well, and this didn't work very well. That's because of my caching. I'm still tuning that feature. That basically a lot of questions that you ask repeatedly, you just don't want to pay OpenAI for, right? Because they cache it for you, but then they charge you for it. So like, why would I do that? But yeah, basically you can iterate it very easily. And hopefully this gives you ideas of what you can use it for. So back to the presentation. So what should you try? So try to write a script, how to actually find an email address online of, I don't know, your dentist, whatever that is. And actually draft the email to that address with something you want, right? Just make a tiny command line interface where you just type in, write this, search this, and it kind of does everything for you. It's a great practice, and those are the little automations that maybe if they're really good, you can start sharing with the community, right? Maybe more people would actually like to use something like this. This is the example code. You don't have to read the details, but pretty much that's everything you need to do to build that, right? You will create a web search. It looks for the email address, grabs the email, grabs all the web results, extracts the email address, drafts the email for you. That's kind of all there is to it. Is it going to be the best email? No. But this, once you build it, will take you 20 seconds. So that's a pretty good start. So the third area is arguably the most exciting area, right? Because your tools that you build and the applications will have to be a lot more intentional and a lot more robust, right? This is not going to be a productivity tool that you put in a script and you're done. But like the impact and how much you can scale this and how much value you can deliver is actually unreal, right? Imagine you have 1,000 people and you save them every day from reading one long email, right? That's 5 minutes. If those 1,000 people save 5 minutes every day, that's the same amount of output as literally having hired 10 new people that will work in the company, right? That's how big the impact can be from something as silly. So yeah, very exciting. So some use cases here for you. Well, data processing. So what is that? Well, finally, you can actually extract the notes from the sales calls and all the various things that happen around the business and actually get a lot of value out of them, right? You can increase the share of the useful data in your business because, you know, SharePoint is where documents go to die. So you can actually finally start tapping into a lot more of that data that your business has. Like this is probably all the data you have, and like this is in your database, and you know what the columns are, right? This can grow. You can expose a lot more to people. Reducing UI barriers and system barriers. Well, I don't know how about you, but I have to enter my performance objectives in 3 different systems. It's a lot of fun. I love it. And as a user, you know the feeling when you come to a new product and there are like all these UI elements everywhere and you have no idea what to do? Well, imagine as a new user, there's going to be box. I just type in, this is what I want to do. I don't care about your UI. Just like, this is what I want to do, right? And it literally does it for you the first time. And then you start to learn the UI. So that's something you can do for your users and also internally. And then obviously there's code search and everything. Like you don't need a year to ramp up the developers in your business because you can actually get the right pieces of code base to them very quickly and very efficiently from the day one. So demo here, I chose AI Help Me. It's a package you can use already. But the reason why I chose it is because I think it's relevant in any context. It will show you that RAG paradigm. It stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is basically fancy talk for I'm going to put the right data in the prompt. So AI Help Me, right. So AI Help Me basically can grab information and from documentation of any package in Julia, right? And for a bunch of packages that are quite popular, we actually download the documentation and prepare it for you. So when you literally start with AI Help Me, you can already see all the Julia documentation, Maki, and a bunch of tidier stuff as well. And we have a Google Summer of Code student, Shreya, is actually working on bringing much more packages and making it much easier. So what would be a use case? I love algebra of graphics, but my brain just refuses to learn all the keywords. So every time I use it, I literally had to use like a separate window with the documentation to like know how do I change something about the limits of the y-axis. So AI Help, how to rotate axis labels as an example. Ignore the p-print, you don't need it. That's because I'm doing some shenanigans under the hood. Basically, you ask the question and it answers like before, right? It feels like the same thing, but it's actually different here because we are putting all the right pieces of the documentation inside of the prompt before we send it to the model, right? So that actually allows us to do a lot of cool things. Do I have another question? I have a bunch of random stuff I did before. But like if I wanted to, I always struggle with the axes. Yeah, changing parameters of axis parameters, right? How do you do that? Another example, we can obviously pretty print it to actually see what's in. But you might be wondering, well, how do I know this is not hallucinated, like all the stuff on ChatGPT, right? So because Julia is so fast, we can actually do a lot of clever things under the hood, right? And this is kind of some of the advantages starting to shine. What we can do is literally expose more of that information and just have Julia calculate, well, what are the pieces of information are new? Where are the information pieces coming from? So if I see this like code snippets, right? It comes from the block one, which in this case is literally like this URL kind of underlying that knowledge, right? I see that the score between 0 and 1 is pretty high, so I have a high confidence that a lot of that came from there. And I can even see these highlights when there are words that we are kind of not recognizing that the model kind of made up, right? It might be okay, but like you immediately know this function name, is it made up or not, right? Which is something you don't get everywhere. So I hope that kind of demonstrates some of the things you can do. And I will give you also a quick sneak peek of, yeah, this one. There's another tool that might be helpful if you start meddling with GenAI. And the tool is called Spehulák. It stands for Spy Snowman because it kind of keeps your system cool and you can't see it. Yeah, someone told me my package names are boring, so I tried to mix it up. So what you see here is basically we are automatically saving every conversation in the background. So I can actually now have a look what exactly went to that model. We even have a view specifically for the RAG applications to really debug them and understand what happens, but I think this is good enough. So as a sneak peek here, we see kind of what template have we used, what model have we used, all those things. You can literally see the prompt that went to the model. This is literally the information that we then compress and send. So these are the instructions, this is the context, like this is how it looks. This is what we dump on the models, right? When you wonder why they respond badly, start here. Usually you're giving them something that's horrible. Like it's random, like what does it figure out, right? But it noticed this axis parameter and that's what it used for its answer, right? So that's kind of how you can understand these systems better as well. So I figured it's worth mentioning. So back to the tips. If you want to try it yourself, build a chatbot, integrate it with like a complex SharePoint site where you know there is a bunch of interesting documentation, and just expose it to your colleagues. You can put like a Slack or Teams around it. If you're wondering how much effort is it, well, once you have the information processed, it's actually as little as these 2 lines. That's all it's going to take to build the first RAG and start asking questions about it. If you're wondering when and how often GenAI is used by the community, we ran a little survey just before. And kind of one of the big learnings was actually that the daily and several times a day usage of GenAI was actually more than half of people, which is roughly how many hands I've seen in the air. The other insight there was actually that the professional segment, the yellow part here, that significantly goes up when it comes to that usage several times a day. That's most likely, my guess would be the code assistants. If you're not not using any of the editors, copilots, or even Cursor, which is probably the best thing I've seen so far, give it a shot. And one other thing, we also ask, what are kind of the challenges that you have with building GenAI in Julia? And by far the biggest thing is kind of things we've always heard, which is ecosystem. The ecosystem immaturity being kind of highlighted. The others were time, knowledge, and external kind of pressure when your boss says you can't do Julia type thing. So let's talk about how to actually you can build things today. And I will also mention some of the gaps you can focus on. As an example project, I'm going to take the AI Help Me. I'm going to skip all these definitions. You can have a look at the slides later. Like I said, retrieval augmented generation means put the right data in the prompt, right? So the model doesn't have to make it up. The best approach I've seen so far for actually building any application is called Eval-Driven Development. It's very similar to TDD, but it's kind of customized for the GenAI. One thing I will say here is this talks about the GenAI piece of your system. Anything serious you're going to build is going to be the system that you will build and the GenAI code, right? You will spend majority of your time building everything else, but this talks about that kind of the beating heart, how to make sure it's successful in the long run. So you will want to start with a canary prompt, which is literally pick a simple case. In AI Help Me, it can be how do I label axes, a y-axis in algebra of graphics. Copy paste literally the pieces of documentation that are relevant in it and send it to the model and see if it responds. You're basically trying to figure out, does this even make sense? If everything is right, does the model know how to do it? Pick the best model you can to basically validate the idea if it's sensible today or not. It can save you a lot of time. Then you do 3 to 5 vibe checks where you basically build a set of harder examples, some harder questions. You will still build it all manually, but like you want to figure out what are some of the edge cases, like what are some hard things that I can ask, and then everything you change, you will check every single one of them. When you change your input a little bit, you will run every single one of them. You still want to see how it basically performs on everything. If you're changing your prompts with one question, you will go in the wrong direction very quickly. At that point, you should kind of know what you're optimizing for and what you're solving for. So you should kind of commit to it. And as the next step, that's when you start bringing the RAG, right? You start like looking up all the documentation. How do I pick the top 5? Like that's kind of where prompting tools will help you a lot. But like this is where you pipe it all together. And again, you keep doing these vibe checks, right? When you build it. That's how you know you're kind of on the right track. That's when you quickly see when something goes off the rails. And then finally, you actually have to, in some cases, manually build 50 to 100 gold test cases. That's what you're going to be running all the time to really see where is my system failing. You can often synthetically generate them, but you kind of need to know how. There are a few blog posts I have on that. And then you just iterate from there, right? Again, constantly going after the test cases. Why do you need all these evaluations, right? Why can't you just build a prompt and see what happens? It's because, first of all, you wouldn't know if it's broken, where it's broken, and then when you fix it, you will not know whether you improved it and if you broke something else. That's kind of why there's this systematic approach to it. That's how you go from fun demo to actually something you can release to people in your business. In the interest of time, I'm going to take this one quick, but I just wanted to highlight basically what is the tech stack? What are the packages that we use? Again, this is what either the actions will be, what your user will see. This is majority of your code. If you want some simple UI, by the way, definitely use stipple.jl, super quick. The AI Help Me package even has a really nice GUI that Pere from the Genie team put together. But like, this is the Julia and everything else. This is where your business magic is. This is where you put all the checks and guardrails to make sure the bad inputs don't make it in, and then the bad outputs don't make it to the users, right? This is the magic, and we try to give you some tools in here. This is the GenAI core, where you would use the prompting tools, and for the RAG, it would be the module RAG tools. And then This is just kind of the LLM layer where we just send the packets and get them back in. You can build all this just with http.jl and JSON tree. It's just like as soon as you want something meaningful, you will basically have to rebuild the rest of the stack. Over long run, you will want to evaluate and monitor the system, and also you will want to think about the inference. You saw Spehulák before. So what are some areas ripe for contributions? We have some amazing DSLs. It might be too early, but like this is where we can share a lot of efforts because this is most of the work. Here, we're missing Pydantic. I'm happy to talk about it later if someone is interested. But like we need a way to handle all these strings and be able to say, this is the schema of what I would want, and then get it back out of it and validate it and have nice errors. Julia's type system is so good that we didn't need Pydantic pretty much until now. And inference would be nice to have. I think that's a commodity. I would be happy to sacrifice that. And then on the monitoring side, you saw the OpenAI API talk. Definitely, we would need some wrappers for these services. So conclusion, come build with us. Whatever you're into, whatever your motivations are, it's fun. It can save you a ton of time, except for the sad faces of my team over there. And it can unlock incredible economic benefits for your business or whoever you work with. If you don't know where to go, check out juliagenai.org. We have a Slack, Generative AI, where you can ask any questions, discourse, community calls. And if you're always curious what's up, Awesome List is where we kind of put all the noteworthy projects and everything that's relevant. And remember, all these models will only get better, right? So whatever doesn't maybe work today or is not good enough, it might be tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks to Jan Siml. Let's give applause. It's impressive how much time this generative AI can save, even for an ordinary person. And I'm sure there would be someone who would like to get some advice on maybe already some of their incentives to save time and increase productivity, even for an organization. Anybody has a question on this expert?
So I'll do the more of a comment than a question thing. But so this is an extremely good package. Like, I don't know if people have used a lot of generative AI stuff, but like I've worked a lot with this, and like I've tried to do a lot of like Python stuff because you kind of have to. And like this is extremely easy to use, and it's like full of all these like very nifty little features. And so I just wanted to like thank you, Jan, for building something that's extremely cool. So yeah, so that's what I got.
I paid him to say that.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
I'll buy you beer later.
How do you compare this package to LangChain?
It's way smaller because it's mostly my effort and from Cameron and a few other people. So our area that we cover is way less. What we try to pick is basically what seems to be the best way to do something. What is the best approach that we hear about constantly, and then we put it in. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think they've done amazing work to get everyone started quickly, but they also created a ton of abstractions everywhere, which makes it kind of hard to understand what goes on in the end. And that's why I showed you the tool like Spehulák, that like you fundamentally want to understand that you throw some string at it. If that string is bad, if you put the wrong information in, the whole thing's bad, right? Like whatever you do. So you want to have that like feeling of knowing what you're doing and be able to go anywhere in the stack all the time. So the philosophy of prompting tools was basically allowing you to like plug in anywhere you want and really understand what exactly is happening under the hood, which I think is slightly different from how they did it. But most importantly, it's in Julia.
All right, thank you.
One thing to add also is why I'm excited about Julia in this is that you saw that most of the effort will actually not happen in the GenAI, right? You just call some model somewhere, right? It's going to be the systems you build around it. And again, Julia is incredibly good for writing good, simple code to achieve potentially really impressive things.